Parents, what's one sentence you'll always regret telling your child? I wish she would be more like your sister. These 9 words ended with my son getting paralyzed from the waist down. I am 42, a mom to 2 teenagers. Lily, 18, my daughter, sharp as a tack, fiercely intelligent, a straight-A overachiever who collects academic accolades and college acceptance letters like they're going out of style. And then there's Ethan, my son, 17, sensitive, introspective, a dreamer. Lately, he's been stumbling, not just small slips, but significant falls. My disappointment in this growing string of failures, and his apparent inability to grasp the need for focus, for drive, had been building for months. It was a heavy, suffocating pressure in my chest, tightening with each bad grade, each shrug, until I let it slip. We were at dinner, the familiar Tuesday night scene in our kitchen, the heart of our home, which lately felt more like a battleground. Homework sprawled across the worn wooden table, Lily's neat, organized stacks, Ethan's crumpled papers pushed to the side. Mark, my husband, was flipping through the newspaper, a silent observer in the escalating tension that seemed to permeate the air whenever Ethan's schoolwork came up. Lily was recounting her day, specifically her AP exams. Her voice was bright, confident. I think I aced the physics one, Mom. The free response questions were exactly what Miss Boyer Davies prepped us for. I smiled, a genuine, unclouded smile. Lily made it so easy to be proud. That's amazing, sweetie. I knew you could do it. You always put in the work. Lily beamed, pushing a strand of her perfectly highlighted hair behind her ear. She had inherited Mark's easy confidence, his ability to move through the world without friction. Ethan sat opposite her, a stark contrast. He was pushing peas around his plate with his fork, head down. I knew his math test grades had come back that day. He'd left the crumpled paper sticking out of his backpack, a large, damning D scrawled in red pen at the top. Another one. It wasn't just math. His grades across the board had been slipping since the beginning of the year. From B's and C's, he was now consistently pulling D's and even an F in history last term. I felt the familiar pressure building in my chest, the disappointment, the worry, the frustration that he wasn't trying, or wasn't trying hard enough, or wasn't trying in the right way. I sighed, a little louder than I intended, the sound sharper, in the quiet moments between Lily's cheerful recounting and Mark turning a page. Ethan, I said, my voice tight, strained with frustration I was trying and failing to contain. You really need to try harder. Look at Lily. I gestured vaguely towards his sister, sitting there radiating effortless success. She puts in the effort, and it shows. She doesn't struggle with these things. Ethan's shoulders slumped a little more, a familiar, defeated posture. He didn't look up from his plate. He just kept pushing those peas, a small, silent act of defiance, or perhaps resignation. Lily rolled her eyes, a typical teenage gesture, but it felt like she was agreeing with me, highlighting the vast, ever-widening gap between them in my mind. The easy one and the difficult one. The success story and the question mark. Ethan just kept staring at his peas, silent, unreachable. Later that week, Ethan mumbled something about struggling with algebra, about the teacher going too fast, about not understanding the concepts. He was sitting on the edge of the couch, twisting his hands in his lap. I was at the kitchen counter, buried in paperwork from my job. Permission slips, requests for counselor meetings, urgent emails from demanding parents. The usual deluge. I barely looked up from the glowing screen. My mind was on a crisis at school, on a student who needed immediate help. Just study more like Lily does, sweetie, I said, my voice dismissive, detached, not grasping the quiet desperation in his tone, the tentative reach for help buried beneath the mumbled words. She spends hours on her homework. She joins study groups. That's what you need to do. Ethan retreated to his room. I heard his door close softly. I felt a pang, a tiny prickle of guilt, a fleeting thought that maybe I should have listened more closely, asked more questions. But the stack of papers called to me. I dismissed the feeling. He wasn't dumb. He just wasn't applying himself. He was being lazy. He needed to step up, as Mark, ever the pragmatic one, often said. He needed to be more like Lily, more disciplined, more focused, more driven. His next progress report arrived like a physical blow, a thick envelope tucked into his backpack, waiting like a coiled snake. D's in 3 subjects. Math, biology, English, 3. Not just the usual math struggles this time. How was that even possible? Had he given up entirely? Had I missed something fundamental? The fear for his future, a cold, sharp knot tightened in my stomach. I sat him down after school, the report spread out on the coffee table like a damning indictment. The red ink screamed off the page, full of D's. I lectured him, my voice rising with every word, the frustration and fear making me sharper, crueler than I intended. I couldn't help but compare him to Lily. Lily's reports were wallpaper in our house. Perfect grades, glowing comments. Lily never had grades like this, Ethan. Never. Not even in middle school. What is going on? Why aren't you even trying? He mumbled something under his breath, his face averted. I am trying, he said, so low I almost didn't hear him. It's hard. Hard? I snapped, the disappointment making me blind to his struggle. Hard is failing 3 subjects. Hard is doing nothing when your sister's getting perfect grades and college scholarships. I don't understand you. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain I didn't fully register in my anger. I'm not her, he said, his voice quiet but firm. It wasn't a defiance. It was a statement of fact, a plea to be seen for who he was. But in my frustration, it sounded like an excuse. Maybe you should be. I spat out the words before I could stop myself. Maybe you should try to be more like her. Just once. Try to be like her. He flinched, his face closing off completely. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a blankness that was even harder to bear. He didn't respond, just stared at the report, his expression unreadable. He had built walls, thick and high, and I had just added another brick. The driving test failure was the final straw in a series of mounting frustrations, a seemingly small thing that somehow encapsulated all the bigger issues. Lily had passed hers at 16, first try, parallel parking flawlessly, confident and calm behind the wheel, even in busy traffic. It was just another thing she did easily. Ethan, his attempts at driving were a source of constant anxiety for both of us. He was tentative, easily easily flustered, his movements jerky and unpredictable. This was his second test. He stalled the car 3 times before even leaving the parking lot. He panicked at the first merge onto a slightly busier road, freezing up, gripping the wheel. The examiner, a woman with a look of weary resignation I recognized from too many parent-teacher conferences, ended the test early. When he got out of the car, his shoulders slumped, his eyes downcast, radiating failure. I couldn't contain my exasperation. All the bottled-up frustration, the worry about his inability to navigate even seemingly simple tasks, boiled over. Ethan, seriously? You failed again? Lily didn't have this problem. She passed on her first try at 16. What is wrong with you? His face fell, the last flicker of hope in his eyes extinguished. He didn't say a word. He just turned and stormed off towards home, his back stiff with hurt and humiliation, leaving me standing there by the car, holding the failed test results, feeling a sickening mix of anger, despair, and a burgeoning guilt I wasn't ready to acknowledge. My disappointment wasn't just confined to the house or the car. It bled into my public life, into my interactions with the community I was a part of, both as a parent and a school counselor. At a school fair, running into colleagues, parents of my students, neighbors, I found myself almost unconsciously bragging about Lily, her recent college acceptances, her scholarship offers, her leadership roles in various clubs, her debate team victories. It was easy, comfortable. People nodded, impressed. She was the child every parent dreamed of having. When someone, a fellow parent from the PTA, a woman I knew from countless school events, asked about Ethan, a forced smile stretched my lips. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, a need to minimize, to deflect. "Oh, Ethan," I said, trying to sound casual, unconcerned. "He's finding his way, exploring his interests. He's more artistic." It sounded vague, dismissive, even to my own ears, like I was apologizing for his lack of concrete achievements, for his deviation from the expected path. I saw Ethan nearby, talking quietly to one of his friends, a sensitive boy named Sam. He overheard me, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I saw the tension radiate from him. He mumbled something to Sam and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, a silent rebuke. I saw the clench of his fists, the rigid set of his back, the way he seemed to shrink into himself. I knew I had hurt him again, publicly this time, confirming his fear that I saw him as a project, a problem, not a source of pride. He tried, in his own quiet, often overlooked ways, to connect with me, to show me his world, the world I seemed so determined to ignore or dismiss. He tried to share the things that mattered to him, the things that gave his life meaning outside of grades and achievements. One evening, he shyly held out a crumpled piece of paper. "Mom," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "I wrote something, a poem. It was beautiful, raw, filled with a sensitivity and depth of emotion I rarely saw in his everyday interactions. In the monosyllabic answers he usually gave me, lines about the quiet sadness of autumn, about the way the light hits the trees in the late afternoon. It was a window into his soul. I was busy, rushing to prepare a presentation for work, a crucial one about supporting students' mental health. The irony, the painful, blinding irony, is not lost on me now. My mind was elsewhere, on deadlines and professional obligations. I glanced at the paper, skimmed a few lines, not truly absorbing the words, the vulnerability he was offering. "This is nice, sweetie," I said, my voice distracted, my eyes still on my laptop screen. "It's very expressive. You have a way with words." He brightened slightly. Then I added, the practicality that seemed hardwired into me, overriding everything else. "But maybe you should focus on your math homework instead. Your grades are really slipping, Ethan. We need to get those up." His face fell, the brief flicker of hope extinguished. He took the paper back, crumpled it into a tight ball, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He didn't show me his writing again. He stopped showing me his sketches, his small, intricate drawings that filled notebooks I only discovered much later. He stopped trying to share his inner world with me. The parent-teacher conference was less a conference and more an indictment. Sitting there, in the sterile, too small chair in the counselor's office, listening to teacher after teacher describe my son, disengaged, quiet, his work incomplete or missing entirely, failing quizzes he should have passed, skipping assignments without explanation. They used words that chilled me. Uncharacteristic apathy, withdrawn, seems to have lost his spark. His history teacher, a kind, older woman, spoke about a brilliant essay he had started but never finished, a project on local history he had seemed genuinely passionate about but simply stopped working on. She looked at me with concern. "He seems to have just checked out, Mrs. Miller." I nodded, forced smiles fixed on my face, apologizing for his lack of effort, his teenage phase. Inside, I was burning with humiliation. My child, the one who was supposed to follow the path, the one who had so much potential, was failing, disengaging, becoming invisible in the very system I worked within. In the car afterwards, the weight of their words, the collective portrait of a child adrift, crushed me. I looked at Ethan, sitting silently beside me, staring out the window, his face a mask of indifference. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger, shame, and a desperation I couldn't articulate. "You're letting everyone down. Your teachers, who see something in you, your father, me. You're letting yourself down. You're wasting your potential." He just shrugged, a small, dismissive movement of his shoulders, still not meeting my eyes. But I saw his lip tremble slightly. He was hurting, I knew, but he had built walls I couldn't penetrate, a silence I couldn't break. Lily's shadow grew longer, more prominent, a constant, shining counterpoint to Ethan's struggles. She won a major regional debate trophy, a large, gleaming cup I proudly hung on the mantelpiece, right in the center. It caught the light, a symbol of her brilliance, her drive, her success. Ethan's latest art project, a small, slightly lopsided clay sculpture he had worked on for weeks, a piece he was surprisingly proud of, sat on a bookshelf nearby, easily overlooked. I had given it a hurried, distracted glance. "That's creative, sweetie," I had said, my mind on my own worries, my own deadlines. It was faint praise, damning in its lack of genuine interest or appreciation. He hadn't asked me to hang it up. He hadn't shown me his art since. The lopsided sculpture gathered dust, a silent testament to my dismissiveness, a physical representation of his creative efforts being sidelined by my focus on academic and conventional success. I even tried, in my misguided way, to fix his driving skills, to force him into competence behind the wheel. It was an extension of my need to fix his other areas of struggle, to mold him into the capable, confident person I believed he could be. I took him out at my car, determined to drill the skills into him through sheer repetition. We were at a busy intersection, rush hour traffic swirling around us, the noise and movement overwhelming. He just froze, gripped the wheel white-knuckled, eyes wide with panic, unable to move, unable to react. "Go, Ethan, go!" I yelled, my own anxiety rising, frustrated by his paralysis. "You have to go. The light's changing. Lily never froze up like this. Just drive, Ethan, drive." He didn't move, didn't say a word, just sat there, paralyzed by fear and perhaps by my yelling. The cars behind us honked. My frustration boiled over, raw and ugly. He finally managed to turn shakily, finding a quiet side street. He pulled over, put the car in park, his hands still trembling on the wheel, and got out. "I'm not driving anymore," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He walked home, leaving me in the car, parked on the side of a quiet street, feeling a sickening mix of anger, fear, and a deep, unsettling shame. He refused to get behind the wheel again. I vented to my friend Carol, a therapist, over coffee at our usual spot. Poured out my frustrations about Ethan, his grades, his lack of motivation, his driving, his apparent inability to just apply himself. How could he be so stuck, so resistant to trying? He's just not applying himself, Carol. Lily had challenges, but she pushed through them. She faced them head on. Ethan just gives up. Carol listened patiently, her expression one of concern. "Rachel," she said finally, her voice gentle but firm, cutting through my rant. "Are you sure you're not pushing him too hard? Comparing him to Lily constantly? That's a heavy burden for any kid." She paused, looking at me intently. "You might be risking his self-esteem, Rachel, making him feel like he can't measure up." I bristled, defensive. "I'm not pushing him. I'm trying to motivate him. I'm trying to get him to see his potential. He's 17. He can't just float through life on dreams." I knew Carol meant well, and professionally, I gave similar advice to parents. But in that moment, I was a frustrated mother, blinded by my anxieties for his future. I couldn't fully absorb her words. I insisted Ethan needed to step up, to try harder, to be more like his sister. I couldn't see that my own anxieties were creating the very resistance I was fighting against. The breaking point came on a rain-swept Thursday night, the kind of persistent, dreary rain that settles over everything, mirroring the mood inside our house. Another failed exam had arrived that day. History this time. An F. Another skipped study session I had tried to arrange. Another argument that spiraled out of control, fueled by exhaustion, frustration, and a deep-seated fear for his future. We were standing in the hallway, near the front door, voices raised, sharp and unforgiving. I was tired, emotionally drained, seeing his blank, unresponsive face, the familiar shrug that felt like a deliberate, willful rejection of everything I stood for, everything I wanted for him. He wasn't hearing me. He wasn't responding. Something inside me, a coil of tightly wound frustration, snapped. The words I had thought before, the comparison that lived unspoken, a constant, simmering presence in my mind burst free, raw and ugly. "I wish you'd be more like your sister," I shouted, the words tearing through the air between us, laced with all the disappointment and frustration that had built up over months, over years of watching him stumble while Lily soared. "I wish you had her drive, her focus, her everything." Ethan froze. His entire body went rigid. His eyes, wide and vulnerable, stared at me, mirroring the devastating look I'd seen that day in the kitchen, months ago, when I dismissed his art, the look he'd had in the car after the driving test. The anger drained from his face, replaced by a look of profound hurt, a deep, raw wound opening up in his eyes. He didn't yell back. He didn't argue. He just stared at me for a long moment, a flicker of something raw and broken in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the arrow that had found its mark. Then he turned and ran to his room, the door slamming shut with a finality that echoed the finality of my words. The sound vibrated through the house, through me. A knot formed in my stomach instantly, cold, heavy. The second the words left my lips, I regretted them. The look on his face, it was devastating. I knew, in that split second, that I had gone too far. I had said the unspeakable. I wanted to go after him, to bang on his door, to apologize, to take them back, to gather the cruel words out of the air and shove them back down my throat. But pride, stubbornness, and a lingering residue of anger and fear held me rooted to the spot in the hallway. I told myself he needed to think about what I said. He needed to understand the gravity of his choices, the depth of my concern. I didn't apologize. I let the silence hang between us, thick with unspoken pain. Hours later, deep in the uneasy silence of the night, long after Mark had gone to bed, I was jolted awake by a sound, a faint metallic groan, the creak of the garage door opening. It was after midnight. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, seized me. My car keys. Where were they? On the hook by the door? I ran downstairs, my heart pounding in my ears. Empty hook. The garage door was ajar. Empty garage. My car was gone. Ethan. He was desperate. Desperate to prove he wasn't a failure, that he wasn't the disappointment I had just declared him to be. Desperate to escape the weight of my words, the crushing comparison, the feeling of being seen as nothing. He took my car, a car he barely knew how to drive, especially not on the highway in the pouring rain, in the dark. A terrifying, impulsive act born of pain and despair. I stood in the empty garage, the cold air seeping in, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The silence of the house screamed louder than any sound. Then, in the distance, the flashing lights, red and blue, swirling against the wet pavement outside, reflecting off the windows, getting closer. Sirens wailed, a mournful, piercing sound, growing louder, closer, closer. My knees buckled. Police. An ambulance. He had crashed. On the highway. Swerved, they said later, to avoid a truck that had merged suddenly. Lost control on the wet road, spun out, hit the median barrier. Badly. The hospital waiting room was sterile, cold, filled with with a fluorescent hum that seemed to mock the turmoil raging inside me. Hours blurred into an agonizing eternity. Mark was there, his face etched with fear, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. Lily arrived, her face pale and shaken, her eyes wide with terror. Finally, a doctor. Their words were calm, measured, but they sliced through the haze of my fear like a scalpel. Accident. Injuries. Severe. Spinal cord. Paralyzed. Paralyzed. From the waist down, the words hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. The world tilted. Paralyzed. Permanent. I collapsed, sobbing, the raw, gut-wrenching sound tearing from my throat. Lily caught me, holding on to me tightly, her own body shaking with sobs. Mark put his arm around my shoulders, his presence a weak anchor in the storm that had just swallowed us whole. Ethan, my son, lying in that hospital bed, so pale, so small amidst the tubes and wires and machines that beeped and whirred around him, awake but silent. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His face was pale, drawn with pain and something else. Despair, resignation. It was his eyes that haunted me. Blank, empty, devoid of the spark they once held. My words, those 7 words. I wish you'd be more like your sister. They had done this. They had pushed him to the edge. They had sent him out into the rain, onto the highway, desperate to prove himself, to be someone he wasn't, someone he could never be. They had led him here, to this hospital bed, to this prognosis. The guilt was a physical weight in my chest, a crushing, suffocating burden that made it hard to breathe. It was a living, breathing thing, feeding on my regret, my shame, my despair. Days turned into weeks in the sterile white world of the hospital room that became Ethan's new home. I sat by his bedside, a constant, silent vigil. Mark was there too, trying to be strong for all of us. Lily visited, her usual teenage energy muted by shock and grief. The first time I tried to apologize, the words choked in my throat, thick with unshed tears. Ethan, I whispered, my voice trembling, fragile. I am so sorry for what I said that night about Lily. It was wrong, so wrong. I didn't mean it. I reached for his hand, lying still on the white sheet. He turned his head away, staring at the blank hospital wall. His voice was a low, flat whisper devoid of emotion, more devastating than any shout. You got your wish. My blood ran cold. What? You got your wish, he repeated, his voice gaining a bitter edge, each word a shard of glass. You wanted me to be different, to be nothing like her. Well, congratulations, Mom. You got it. I'm nothing now. Nothing like her. Nothing at all. His words were like shards of glass in my heart, twisting, turning, amplifying the guilt that already consumed me. He had heard me. He had believed me. He had interpreted my cruel words, my frustrated outburst, as a wish for his non-existence, a complete dismissal of his entire being. He saw himself now, lying in this bed, paralyzed, as the ultimate manifestation of my disappointment, my wish fulfilled. The family strain was immense. The accident, the diagnosis, the weight of my words. It cracked the foundation we had built. Lily, distraught by her brother's condition, pulled away from me. Her eyes, usually so bright and full of life, held a look of quiet accusation, of hurt and confusion. You were too hard on him, Mom, she said once, her voice trembling, raw with pain. You were always comparing him to me. He just wanted you to see him, to be proud of him, not just proud that he was trying to be me. Her words, while painful, were a mirror reflecting my own worst fears about my parenting, confirming that my focus on Lily's achievements had blinded me to Ethan's needs. Mark, bless him, tried to hold us together, to be the steady presence we all desperately needed, but even his strength was tested. He urged me to focus on Ethan's recovery, on the path forward, but I could feel the unspoken reproach in his tone, the understanding that my words had played a role in leading us to this nightmare. I felt like a complete failure. As a mom, as a wife, as a human being, haunted by Ethan's blank stare, by his bitter words, by the 7 words that had shattered our lives and irrevocably changed his. My first real hospital visits with Ethan, after that awful exchange, were agonizing. I didn't know what to say, how to be. The air in the room was thick with unspoken pain and resentment. I brought his favorite comics, the ones he used to devour for hours, lost in worlds far from his own. He barely looked at them, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. I sat by his bed, the silence stretching between us, thick with the weight of all that had been said, all that had been broken. I tried again, a raw, honest attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. Ethan, I said, my voice trembling, fragile, raw with emotion. I was wrong, so wrong to compare you to Lily, so wrong to say those words. You are enough, more than enough, just as you are. You are kind, you are sensitive, you are creative. He scoffed, a small bitter sound that held a world of pain and cynicism. Too late for that, he muttered, still not meeting my eyes. The words hung in the air, a heavy curtain between us. Physical therapy began, grueling, painful, slow. Watching him struggle, his face etched with effort and frustration, trying to get his limbs to respond to the signals his brain was sending, was agonizing. He was working with a dedicated, kind physical therapist named Sarah. I attended every session, standing on the sidelines, my heart aching, cheering every tiny movement, every flicker of a muscle. You can do it, sweetie, I'd say, my voice filled with forced optimism, with a desperation I tried to hide. Ethan went through the motions, his face a mask of indifference, but his spirit seemed broken, his bitterness a shield. He rarely spoke during therapy, just followed Sarah's instructions with quiet determination. I started seeing a family therapist, just me at first, then with Mark and Lily, and eventually, tentatively, with Ethan. I poured out the guilt, the regret, the fear, the whole horrifying story of the mounting pressure, the misguided expectations, the words, the accident. The therapist listened, gently guiding me to understand my own motivations, my anxieties, my misguided attempts to push Ethan towards a path I thought was best, a path that looked like Lily's. She helped me see that my fear for his future had blinded me to his present, to his strengths, to his needs. She suggested patience, honesty, and finding ways to connect with Ethan on his terms in his world. She also suggested journaling, writing down my regrets, my apologies, my fears, my hopes. Writing letters to Ethan I was too scared to share, too afraid of his rejection. I wrote one, a long, tear-stained confession confession of my regrets, my love for him, not for what I wanted him to be, but for who he was, who he always had been. I wrote about his kindness, his unique perspective, his quiet strength. I left it by his bed one night while he was sleeping, hoping he would read it, hoping it would make a difference. He didn't acknowledge it the next day, but I saw it later, tucked under his pillow. He kept it. A small, fragile sign of hope. Lily stepped up in ways I hadn't expected, bridging the gap in ways I couldn't. She started visiting Ethan regularly, just the two of them. I'd hear their voices from his room, low tones, sometimes laughter. One afternoon, I overheard Lily apologizing to Ethan for her part in the constant comparisons, for always being the easy one, the successful one, the one who made things look effortless. She told him how she had always envied his creativity, his ability to get lost in his own world, in his art, something she, in her driven pursuit of external validation, had never been able to do. She spoke about the pressure she felt to be perfect, the weight of expectations. Hearing Lily admit her own struggles, her own forms of pressure, her own moments of vulnerability, seemed to soften something in Ethan. He even joked about her perfect life, his voice holding a hint of his old humor, a flicker of their old sibling dynamic returning. It was their first real conversation in months, one that wasn't strained or filled with unspoken resentment. Outside the hospital walls, the community was buzzing with gossip and speculation. At a PTA meeting, a place where I usually felt confident and respected, I felt exposed, vulnerable. I overheard parents whispering about Ethan's accident, their hushed tones filled with speculation and veiled judgment. I heard snippets of conversations blaming me, my pressure, my unrealistic expectations, my tiger parenting. The gossip stung like a physical blow, amplifying my own guilt and shame. I slipped out of the meeting early, tears streaming down my face, the weight of their judgment added to my own. But as I drove home, the sting hardened into resolve. Their opinions didn't matter. Their judgment was irrelevant. Only Ethan did. Only his recovery, his well-being, rebuilding our bond, mattered. I would focus on him, on us. The rumors could burn themselves out. I had more important things to focus on. Then, a small miracle, a moment of light in the long, difficult journey. During a physical therapy session, Sarah was working with Ethan's legs, focusing on stimulating nerve responses, and he wiggled his toes. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement, a flicker beneath the sheet. But it was movement. It was hope. I gasped, tears springing to my eyes, squeezing his hand, my voice choked with emotion. Ethan. Oh, Ethan. He looked at me, a flicker of surprise, maybe even pride in his eyes. And he didn't pull his hand away. He squeezed mine back. Sarah, cautiously optimistic, shared the doctor's assessment, a 60% chance of full recovery. With years of grueling physical therapy, 60%. It wasn't a guarantee, not a magic fix, but it was hope. A tangible possibility of him walking again, of regaining movement and independence. It was something to fight for. I started making adjustments to accommodate Ethan's new reality and to support his interests. I met with Ethan's school counselor to arrange homebound learning, modifying his schedule, focusing on core subjects he could manage remotely. Crucially, I encouraged his art again. I bought him new sketch pads, charcoal pencils, watercolors he could use from his bed. I framed some of his older sketches and hung them in his hospital room, surrounding him with reminders of his talent, of the world he found solace in. Slowly, hesitantly at first, Ethan started drawing again. He spent hours with his sketch pad, his brow furrowed in concentration. One afternoon, I walked in to find him sketching, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his face, the first real smile I'd seen in weeks. His art was a lifeline, a way for him to express himself, to escape the confines of his physical limitations. Family therapy became a crucial part of our healing process, a safe space to unpack the years of unspoken resentments and the raw pain of the accident. In one session, the therapist gently encouraged Ethan to talk about his feelings, about the comparison to Lily, about the impact of my words. He spoke about feeling invisible next to his sister, like he could never measure up, like he was a constant disappointment, a source of worry instead of pride. He spoke about how much my words that night had hurt him, how they had confirmed his worst fears about himself, how they had pushed him to that desperate, impulsive act. Then it was my turn. With tears streaming down my face, my voice thick with emotion, I confessed the depth of my regret, the fear that had driven my words, the profound mistake I had made in comparing him to his sister, in failing to see him for who he was. That sentence, I said, the words catching in my throat, was the biggest mistake of my life, Ethan. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I see you now. I see you. Ethan nodded, tears in his own eyes, the bitterness in his expression softening. I want to try, he said softly, his voice fragile but clear. I want to try to be okay. It was a breakthrough, a moment of fragile hope. Mark played a vital role in our family healing, stepping up in quiet but meaningful ways. He didn't dwell on the past. He focused on the present, on creating moments of connection and normalcy. He organized family game nights in Ethan's hospital room, bringing his favorite board games, creating moments of lightness and laughter in the heavy hospital atmosphere. He would sit with Ethan, talking about sports, about movies, about anything that wasn't therapy or physical therapy. He was just dad, present and steady. Ethan laughed for the first time during one of those game nights. A real, genuine laugh that filled the room and brought tears to my eyes. And I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest, a sense that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back. Ethan's physical progress continued, slow, painstaking, but progress nonetheless. He regained enough movement in his fingers to hold a pencil steadily, to draw with more control, his sketches becoming more detailed, more confident. One afternoon, he sketched a portrait of me. It was raw, honest, capturing the lines of worry and guilt etched on my face, the exhaustion in my eyes, but also, surprisingly, a hint of hope, of resilience. He handed it to me, a small, folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, my hands trembling slightly. I looked at the portrait, then at him. It's amazing, sweetie, I whispered, tears welling up. You really captured everything. He looked at me, his gaze steady, me. The bitterness in his eyes softened by something else. I'm still mad, he said, his voice quiet, but I don't hate you. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was progress. It was a bridge offered. I hugged him, sobbing, holding on to him tightly, burying my face in his hospital gown, and he let me. He hugged me back, his arms, though weak, holding on to me just as tightly. The community, once a source of gossip, became a source of immense support. I organized a fundraiser for Ethan's ongoing therapy, his medical equipment, the modifications we would need to make to our house. Neighbors, friends, colleagues, parents from school, they all rallied. People I barely knew donated, offered help, sent cards. At the fundraiser event, people shared stories about Ethan, his quiet kindness, his thoughtfulness, the times he had helped them or their children without seeking recognition. I heard stories about him helping a younger kid with a broken bike, about him leaving a small, encouraging drawing on a friend's desk before a big test. I realized he had touched more lives than I had ever known, in quiet, meaningful ways, in ways I had overlooked in my relentless focus on grades and achievements. The community's outpouring of love and support was a powerful affirmation of his worth, a worth that had nothing to do with academic success or athletic ability or driving skills. It was about his character, his heart. At a school talent show, an event I usually attended to watch Lily excel on the debate stage or accept another award, I was asked to say a few words about resilience, about overcoming challenges. I stood on the stage, nervous, my voice trembling slightly at first. I spoke about the different ways we measure success, about the importance of seeing and valuing our children for who they are, for their unique strengths and spirits, not for who we want them to be, not for how they compare to others. Without mentioning the accident explicitly, I spoke about making mistakes as a parent, about the profound regret that can come from words spoken in frustration, words that can cut deeper than any physical blow. I spoke about the incredible resilience and spirit of my son Ethan, about his journey, his courage, his talent, his kindness. I spoke about how he had taught me more about strength and perseverance in the past year than I had learned in a lifetime. Ethan was watching via video call from his hospital room. Later that night, I got a text. A simple message. Thanks, Mom. Simple words, but they meant the world. They were a sign that he was listening, that he was hearing me, that the bridge was holding. Ethan found a new goal, a new driving force, a new focus for his incredible resilience. He told me, his voice quiet but firm, that he wanted to walk across the stage at his high school graduation in 2 years. Not in a wheelchair, but walking. It was a monumental goal, daunting and ambitious, requiring years of grueling therapy and unwavering determination. But seeing the look in his eyes, the spark that had returned, I knew he meant it. I promised to support him every single step of the way, no matter how long it took, no matter how hard it was. We started setting small milestones together, gaining strength to transfer from the bed to the chair, learning to use braces, practicing standing. Family healing continued, a slow, painstaking process. Months turned into a year, then 2. Ethan was using a wheelchair for mobility, but he could stand with the help of braces and parallel bars, taking tentative steps during therapy. Lily and I were his biggest cheerleaders at his therapy sessions, celebrating every tiny gain in strength, every moment of regained movement. Mark built a ramp at our house, making it accessible for Ethan, modifying the bathroom, creating a space that was comfortable and functional for him. Ethan started tutoring younger kids in art at the hospital, then at a local community center, finding purpose and connection in sharing his passion, inspiring others with his resilience and his talent. One evening, Ethan and I were sitting on the porch, the same porch where I had lectured him countless times about grades and expectations, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant colors. The air was quiet, comfortable, filled with the chirping of crickets. The silence between us wasn't strained anymore. It was peaceful. Easy, you know, Ethan said, his voice soft, breaking the silence. For a long time, after the accident, after what you said, I thought you didn't love me. Not really. Not for me. My heart ached, a familiar pang of regret. Oh, sweetie, I said, reaching for his hand, finding it strong, warm, and squeezing it tightly. I always did, more than anything. My fear, my own anxieties, they just got in the way. I forgot how to show it sometimes. I got lost in what I thought you should be, and I stopped seeing who you were. He squeezed my hand back. We're okay now, he said, a quiet certainty in his voice. We're going to be okay. At a neighborhood picnic last summer, months after the major conflicts and the fundraiser, a parent I barely knew, someone I had only seen from a distance at school events, approached me. Rachel, she said, her eyes kind, filled with genuine warmth. I just wanted to say, everyone in the neighborhood is so inspired by you and Ethan. His strength, his spirit, your dedication. It's incredible to witness. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached my eyes. He's teaching me what matters, I said. Being him, not anyone else. That's more than enough. It's everything. Ethan sketched a comic about his journey, a story about a boy who faces a great fall but finds the strength to rise again, not alone, but with the support of those who learn to see him for who he truly is. He dedicated it to me. I framed it, hung it on the wall in the living room, a central piece, a testament to our shared journey, our pain, our resilience, our healing. It hung there next to Lily's debate trophy, 2 different achievements, 2 different paths, equally valued, equally celebrated. His recovery odds held steady at 60%, a medical probability, a number on a chart, but his spirit was already soaring, unbound by physical limitations, stronger than I had ever imagined possible. Our bond, though scarred by those 7 words and the tragedy they precipitated, was growing stronger, deeper, forged in pain and regret, but also in love, forgiveness, and the slow, painstaking process of healing. I still regretted the words, every single day. They were a permanent scar on my memory, on my heart, but they were also a reminder of how far we had come, how much we had learned, and how much stronger our love was for surviving the storm. The weight of the regret was still there, a constant companion opinion, but it was tempered now by a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for Ethan's resilience, for his willingness to heal, for the second chance he had given me. Gratitude for the hard-won understanding that love means meeting your child where they are, celebrating who they are, not mourning who you wanted them to be. The weight of 7 words, a lifetime of regret, and the quiet, enduring strength of love.